Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
Well, my friends, the WNBA task force, yes, they had a task force of GMs and coaches and other experts in the WNBA. They met on Wednesday to try to define what a woman was. And they came out of that meeting empty-handed, my friends. That's where we find ourselves today on Q&A Friday. I thought that was a great fit for Q&A Friday. One of the questions we will answer today very succinctly, very easily, is what is a woman, my friends? This is absolutely remarkable what we're dealing with here today, but this is part and parcel of what it looks like when a group of leftists runs anything, my friends. They can't define terms. They've got to get a task force involved. They feign ignorance whenever something that is obvious goes against their political beliefs, their political ideology, their worldview. And so here we are, my friends. I want to talk about this today. Again, welcome to Q&A Friday. I am your ever so benevolent dictator here behind the microphone, Todd Huff. I welcome you to the program. It is a pleasure to be here today. If you have questions, you can text those 317-785-1030, 317-785-1030, or you can email Todd at toddhuffshow.com. I would say the easiest way, my friends, to stay on top of this and to have direct access constantly where you can ask your questions is to join the Inner Circle. The Inner Circle goes out every evening here, every weekday evening. It has links to, it has articles to things that we can't get to. It's got clips of the show. It's got the links to articles that I put in the stack of stuff, which gives you the background information to the things we've discussed on this program. All of that is totally free, and you can ask your questions through, simply responding to that email. And you can join the Inner Circle by texting the word join to that number I gave you earlier. So text join to 317-785-1030. All right. So let's get in it today, my friends. Let's recap here first and foremost what's going on here. I've got a headline here, a story pulled up from ESPN.com. Here's what the headline says: WNBA task force, my friends, discusses transgender athletes amid furor. So let's establish what happened here. Recently, we had two former NBA players, biological men, declare their eligibility for the WNBA draft, which will happen next summer. So the WNBA has been given great amounts of notice here. Tremendous leeway as far as the time is concerned. This is not something that's going to happen next week. This is something that's going to happen next summer. One of those individuals is named Enes Kanter Freedom. The other is named Royce White. Both of them are big, strong, physical men, powerful men who would dominate the WNBA. I don't care what these men averaged in the NBA. I don't care what they averaged in college or high school or elementary school, middle school. It makes no difference. These men would be physically unstoppable if they were to play in the WNBA. Not too long ago, we talked about another trans woman. Of course, Enes Kanter Freedom and Royce White are doing this to make a point and to solve a problem, an obvious problem for the WNBA, which again stands for women's. The first word in the name of their organization they can't define. in the WNBA. Royce White and Enes Kanter are trying to help them come to a conclusion, come to a place where they can understand objective truth and reality and actually define what the term is. So, but there's also another trans woman who's actually playing already. He's playing in France. His name is Julie Tatar, and he is a biological man, trans woman, which means fake woman, pretending to be a woman overseas, and he's dominating. We talked about him maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I told the WNBA, I called on them at that time to show the world that you're not transphobic, to show the world that you are on the side of the trans community, and invite Julie Tatar to play in the WNBA, because Julie Tatar said if he was called by a WNBA team that he would play. And this guy dominates over there in France. He averages 21 points and 20 rebounds. I've seen some highlights. You may have seen some highlights as well. This isn't just a man. This is a man he's a powerful man. He's not as powerful as Enes Kanter or Royce White, not as big and strong and dominant. But nonetheless, he is a big, strong man, a man amongst girls out there, and he's dominating. He won Player of the Year in the league he's in. He won Defensive Player of the Year in the league that he's in. He also won Domestic Player of the Year, which when I heard that, I thought, wait a minute, what are we doing here? This seems like this is an award that would have been given out back in the 1970s or something. This sounds like it needs to be brought into the modern times, but he's the Domestic Player of the Year in France as well. I mean, this guy won the Triple Crown in women's basketball in France, and now he said he would entertain. He would certainly entertain a call from the WNBA. So we went from that point to shortly after that, almost immediately after that, Enes Kanter and Royce White declaring their eligibility for the WNBA. And why did they do this? Well, again, they're trying to make a point here. It's clear, it's obvious, but listen, let's not oversimplify this. Let's not oversimplify this. They're also highlighting a massive problem in the basic setup of the WNBA. That's obvious. If you can't define what a woman is, how in the world can you be leading and operating the WNBA? The league, by the way, the WNBA is just now celebrating this year its 30th anniversary. They've had 30 years to decide what the W in WNBA means, and they had a task force meet earlier this week of presidents, team presidents, general managers. They met Wednesday. They talked about the transgender athlete eligibility guidelines and rules and so forth, and they have no eligibility rules. They left that meeting after 30 years. After 30 years of having the opportunity to define what a woman is, they still couldn't. Even when the task force, I thought task forces were designed to solve any problem. I thought maybe they need to get a blue letter commission on this. Can we get that together? Kathy Engelbert, maybe you could call one of those groups together and they solve this problem as well. I thought when the task force, when the Blue Ribbon Commission walked in, boom, problem was solved. These are the experts. These are the people who are leading the WNBA. These are the people who every day are waking up, devoting their lives to the Women's National Basketball Association, running teams, picking players. You're telling me that the general managers don't know the players who are eligible for their league? That's their entire job, is to build the roster, is to fill the spots on the team. Do they not know who's eligible? This is beyond. This is basics 101. It can't get any more basic than this, my friends. And they've had 30 years to solve this problem, define these terms, and they can't do it. So the result of the meeting of the minds, the experts. Remember, we're supposed to trust the experts. That's what we were told back in COVID. Trust the experts. Ketanji Brown Jackson, when she was answering questions during her confirmation hearing before the Senate committee as she was sitting to be confirmed. She was nominated, waiting for confirmation to be Supreme Court Justice of the United States of America. She was asked what a woman is, and she says, "I'm not a biologist." Maybe the task force needs to bring in biologists. Heck, I would be happy to step in. If I ran this meeting, my friends, if you ran this meeting, first of all, it wouldn't need to happen. There could be a memo sent out. There could be a group text sent out. There could be an email sent out. There could be a video where you sit down in front of the camera and you say, "I'm here today." It's Q&A Friday here at the Todd Huff Show. If you were to ask me, what is a woman? If that was the question, which I'll answer today, I'll help the WNBA task force out. A woman is an adult human female. That's what it is. A woman is an adult human female. If you need help on defining what a female is, well, a female is one of the two biological sexes created by God in the order of creation. It is the sex that is designed for and has the reproductive organs to conceive and bear children. That's what this is not complicated. Listen, infants all across this country, every night when they're hungry and want comfort, they know the difference between mom and dad. Toddlers running around this country today know the difference between men and women. I still go back to the days when our kids were younger. I remember there's certain times kids wanted mom and kids wanted dad. They knew the difference at a very young age. When they got a boo-boo or a little scrape or whatever, they went to mom for the comfort, for the hugs, for the kisses on the elbow or whatever, whenever they skinned the elbow or the knee. And then my friends, but that reminds me, can I share this really quickly? That they would come to dad when they had, when there was a noise in the night, when they were scared, when they needed protection. This is how kids are. This is how we're hardwired. They understand. God made men and women different. See, when I was in school, and I'm going to tell you a story really quickly, but when I was in school, they told us that men can do everything, or women can do everything men can do, which is, depending on what it is, may have some degree of truth, but there's some things that's not true, and men can't do everything women can do. We are different. If we were identical, there wouldn't be need for both of us. One of us would be unnecessary. Regardless, we're talking about this and the skinning of the knees and kids running to mom and dad. I'm reminded, if my wife did something with friends and I was tasked with being alone with the kids, I love the kids. We used to do stuff. We used to go to Chuck E. Cheese pizza. My wife thought I was crazy taking 3 little kids to that place, and I love that kind of stuff. Take them to baseball games at Victory Field, Pacers games, and things like that. I would do that with the kids. But when they were really little, that was hard for me. I remember asking her, "Can you give me like a list of what I have to do at the end of the day, get these things done?" And I remember she would give me the list that it would include things like bath time. And I'm like, hold on, how long do I need to do for this stuff? I can help when she's doing bath time. I'm there for dinner, but if I'm just doing it all myself, I needed a schedule. And however long it took her, let's say it took her 20 minutes for a bath. You needed to schedule. I needed to schedule an hour and a half. And at the end of that hour and a half, there was probably 6 inches of water on the bathroom floor. It was a mess. It was chaos. It was fun. But dad was just different at running that show than mom. And I remember one of the things that I used to do with the kids, and I enjoyed doing this. Still talk about this to this day. If they would get a boo-boo, and of course mom wasn't there for the comfort, they needed mom. I realized that I was limited in some of the things I could do to comfort them. And so I came up with this idea kind of on the spot one day, and I said, well, let me put an invisible Band-Aid on it, to which the little kids were like, yeah, let's get this going, Dad. And so I would just hold my hands up with nothing in it, acting like I was peeling off the paper on the back, and then really carefully placing the invisible Band-Aid on their boo-boo. That's what I would do. And then I would ask them, did that help your boo-boo? And they would say, yes, Dad, thank you. But there's differences between men. I had to do that because I wasn't mom. I was different. Little kids know the difference. But I just answered it here on this program. I helped the WNBA task force And I know Matt Walsh has been working on this for ages, looking for... Listen, the WNBA has taken 30 years. Some of these gender specialists out there teaching college courses in some things have spent even longer than that searching or pretending to search for definitions of what it is to be a woman. So here's where we are, my friends. I've answered it in 10 seconds. They can't answer it in 30 years. But again, the WNBA Board of Directors approved the WNBA April 24th, 1996. That's 30 years. The league play began June of 1997. They're celebrating their 30th season in 2026. In fact, they've got a little logo that has the number 30 on it. So they've still, after 30 years, have been incapable of doing this. In their collective bargaining agreement, it says only players who are women are eligible to play in the WNBA. So they take the time to make that differentiation, that statement, but they have not defined what a woman is. If you go through that collective bargaining agreement, you'll see there are definitions for all other types of terms and words, as well there should be, so that we understand what you mean with the words you use, especially in this very confused culture that we find ourselves in. But they don't have a definition for woman. So there's no policy, there's no definition in the collective bargaining agreement. There's no established definition that the WNBA uses, though I suspect it would be the one that Matt Walsh is often uncovered during the making of his documentary, What is a Woman? When people would say a woman who is someone who identifies as a woman, which of course makes no sense. Matt Walsh and I or whoever else would ask, well, what is that thing? And they would insist, well, it's a woman. You don't know what a woman is? No, I'm asking you to define what a woman is. I know what my definition is. I'm asking for what yours is. I'm not asking whether you can say the word repeatedly. I'm not asking you to define the word by just repeating the word. I'm asking you to tell me what that word is. And they're incapable of doing it. It is absolutely insane. The league has let me read the league's response. The league responded. They gave a statement. It's not very long here. Get ready for this. This is fantastic. Today's meeting, which, by the way, was conducted by the experts, the people who know women and women's basketball and women's sports. They say today's meeting covered a wide range of topics. Maybe that, by the way, was the first mistake. Maybe your meeting should have just been focused on defining what your league is. Maybe that's a good place to start. It's hard to run the league and draw any other conclusions and make any other decisions if you don't know the mission. You know, there's a thing called mission drift. Mission drift is when your organization starts to drift away from who you were created to be. So let's say you were a group that, well, the government's a great example of something that has mission drift, right? There are basic things our government was created to do. They don't like to do those. They tell us they can't do those, in fact. But they can do everything else. They can, for example, lower the level of the oceans and the seas in the next 50 years, they tell us. If we give them more of our liberty and more of our tax dollars, they can do that. No problems, no questions asked. But they can't do what is even outlined in the Constitution, or the preamble, I should say, of the Constitution. Provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, those sorts of things they have trouble doing, but they will drift into something else. And in order to drift, you have to first have a defining mission statement or objective that you are trying to attain, or trying to reach, it's your mission. It's what you wake up every day to do. And you would think the WNBA would know what that mission is, and part of that mission would be, well, to define who the people are who can play in our leagues. Going back to their statement here, it says that wide range of topics included ongoing discussions on transgender athletes and the continued hate and vitriol directed at players online. How about the hate and vitriol directed at players on the court by other players? That could be something that you should focus on as well with the entire, well, with a huge chunk of the league trying to hurt players like Caitlin Clark and Sophie Cunningham. What happened to Sophie over last weekend when she basically was headhunted was inexcusable. Anyway, the statement continues here. We will continue to engage all league stakeholders in the coming weeks and months. There's not going to be a resolution to this anytime soon. We will approach these important conversations thoughtfully and in alignment with the values of our league. Listen, how do you have values in your league when you don't even have definitions for the basic terms of the league? What is your mission? What is the definition of woman? How about we start there? How about we not even worry about values until we first define what a woman is, who you're supposed to be providing the ability to play basketball to? They're the most fundamental and basic question. Who are the people that you are providing the opportunity to play? Who are they? Tell us what that is. We don't care about your values yet. We care first about who you're there to provide the ability to play basketball. So, last sentence here is a doozy. There are no immediate eligibility matters affecting the WNBA, and we strongly denounce, here we go, the bad faith efforts to use these topics to demean or marginalize others. That's what they say. They can't define the terms, but they know that there's bad faith actors. So in other words, the WNBA can't define what a woman is. It certainly can't define what a trans woman is. Of course, trans in the case of gender means fake. So trans woman means fake woman, which means biological male. So they can't define trans women or women, but they can certainly identify trans women, women who pretend to be fake women. This is wild. You have to diagram this out, but that's exactly what they've concluded. They know that the bad actors, the bad faith actors, are Royce White and Enes Kanter Freedom, judging them for expressing their femininity, judging them for identifying as a woman. I thought that we weren't supposed to be doing this. I thought we were supposed to be understanding as people explore gender and so forth, but they've come out and said that these two, they didn't name them by names, but they might as well have named them by name, and they've said that these are bad faith actors. There's no way in the world they're letting these folks play, but there is no easy way out of this either for the WNBA, my friends. So again, they don't know what a woman is. They certainly don't know how to define that. They can't define trans woman because they can't define woman, but they can suddenly tell us who the bad faith actors are, the trans women. So the fake women, they can certainly identify. What a mess, my friends. I've got to take a time out. You're listening here to Conservative Not Bitter Talk. I'm your host, the one and only Todd Huff, on this Q&A Friday, my friends. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. We're talking about the WNBA's inability, in spite of having all the experts sitting around the table. Right? We're supposed to listen to the experts, listen to what they say, listen to what they conclude. In spite of all of them meeting earlier this week, they are still unable to define what a woman is, which is wild considering the WNBA is now playing in its 30th season. How can you get away with playing 30 seasons and not have a definition for the players who are eligible to participate in your league? It is completely illogical, but just it goes to show how much this world, this league is a microcosm. It's not, listen, this isn't about basketball. This is about the ideology that we're up against. This shows the lengths to which people on the left will go to defend their morally bankrupt worldview, their ideology that is built upon sinking sand. Nothing makes sense. They can't define anything. They don't know truth, or actually, I think they do know truth. They just reject truth at each and every turn. And so this is where we are, my friend. This is what we are up against. We're on Q&A Friday here as well. And one of the questions that I want to address is, when did this modern trans movement begin? So I want to talk a little bit about that, my friends. I'll do that here in just a moment. But if you're curious about Kratom or just trying to figure out who you can trust, take a look at Christopher's Organic Botanicals. They are a family-run company. They offer natural, lab-tested Kratom, not the synthetic stuff that has given Kratom a bad name. Real kratom is responsibly sourced. It's tested for purity, and it is natural and not synthetic. That's what Christopher's is all about. They work directly with farmers in Indonesia. They follow the same traditions that have been trusted for generations. There's no gimmicks. There's no shortcuts. Just a clean, honest alternative for people looking for a more natural way to support their health. You can start with their Kratom Starter Pack. It's a great way to begin. Use coupon code ToddHuff to save 10% on your first order. Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. That's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Truth, tradition, transparency. So if you research this and you ask when's the modern trans movement, you're going to find a lot of things in the timeline. And you'll see that with certain leftist intellectuals and so forth, you'll see some of this stuff get traced back to the 50s and 60s. But that's the quote-unquote scientific, that's the woke intellectual community trying to drive our culture in the direction it's driven. But let's really look at the question of when did this become popular and mainstream? Because I can guarantee you that when I was in school, when the vast majority, if you were born, let's say before, my goodness, maybe before 2000, maybe the mid-90s, but let's just say mid-90s or 2000, this was not a thing. This was not a thing in your life, almost certainly. But now it has become, it's been pushed down your throat at every turn. This is part of what it looks like for things to devolve in our worlds today, as a piece of paper goes flying off my desk here. So I looked up a couple of things. In 2013, I see this. It was still sufficiently unusual, the idea of using pronouns, or making sure, not using pronouns, but making sure people knew what your preferred pronouns were. The Associated Press ran a story that was headlined, "Preferred Pronouns Gain Traction at U.S. Colleges." That was in 2013. The summary here says it described students at places such as Mills College going around the room, introducing themselves by name and pronouns. Very ahead of the game there, Mills College, including they and ze. That may, for some of you, if you were born in the 70s or 60s or before, if I say some of these things, you're going to be, listen, I was born in the late 70s. The idea that Z is even a word that means something, which again, it probably doesn't, because none of these words can be defined. Nonetheless, that's when this sort of stuff began, or at least there's articles being written about it in the media. 2015, the American Dialect Society selected singular they as its word of the year in 2015. So they is singular now. They is singular. I remember, if you try to do this in college, if you wrote a paper and you said they said this, and they meant to do this in high school, if they referred to a single person, your English teacher would correct you. I'm wondering if this is changed in the way that we teach English now in the public education system. They used to mean multiple people. Now, there's a singular version of they because we're woke out there, my friends. 2017, there was this, again, looking at the timeline here, Billions introduced what was widely reported as the first non-binary main character on North American television, Taylor Mason, played by Asia Kate Dillon. Both actor and character use they, them pronouns, so very ahead of the game there. 2018-19, this is when it kind of gets into mainstream culture. Merriam-Webster says in 2018 and 19 that searches for they exploded by 313. That's actually in 2019. 313%. It added the non-binary definition of singular they for the dictionary that September and named they its 2019 word of the year. 2019, the American Psychological Association endorsed singular they in professional writing, blah, blah, blah. 2021, the practice became institutionalized in corporate America. By the end of 2019, Forbes was already writing that seeing pronouns in email signatures and social media bios was, quote, not uncommon, although far from widespread. By 2021, LinkedIn had actually built a pronoun field into the user profiles. Later, LinkedIn reported that more than 20 million members had added their pronouns. So that gives you an idea of when this stuff happened. But it was well after the forming of the WNBA in 1996. They knew what a woman was. In fact, I haven't done this, but as I've been talking here, I thought it would be nice if we could get our hands on the older collective bargaining agreements to see if this term ever was defined. I believe it might have been. I don't know. This is just a hunch. Let me tell you another thing that I've stumbled across that I want to share with you. I can't play the clip here. It's a video. It's an old Saturday Night Live skit. I want to go through this really quickly. I just have a couple of minutes left here. March 21st, 1987, Saturday Night Live aired an episode where the headline of the skit was Girl Crazy Obstetrician. It was played by Phil Hartman, Dr. Jacob Hoffritz, I'm not going to go through the people in the skit, but basically I've watched this skit. The doctor had delivered more than 4,300 babies in this skit, and he had said every one of those babies was a girl. So in the skit, basically the skit was there was a journalist who came to do a story on this doctor who delivered 4,300 babies, and all of them were girls by his own admission, which of course is statistically impossible. In fact, she came and said, my editor did the math, and it was like 1 in 400 trillion or some ridiculous number, the odds that you've delivered 4,300 babies and they've all been girls. And he said, well, that's what we've got here. And he said, I'm about to see a couple right now for an appointment. Would you like to sit in on that appointment? And she says, sure. So a couple comes in, a pregnant woman with her husband. They quickly share that they have had 7 children delivered by this doctor. One of those, she's pregnant with their 8th. All 7, of course, have been baby girls. The husband's wanting a boy. So they're going through this conversation. And he says, doctor, can you tell me if I'm having a boy this time? He said, well, you're having a girl again. The husband's dejected. And then the husband asks a question. Doctor, is this baby going to have the procedure done as well? And he says, yes, this one's going to have that procedure done. And the journalist, the female journalist, says, well, what's this procedure? And the doctor straight up says, well, some girls are born with, if you got young ears, please cover them, 3, 2, 1. But here we go. Some girls, he said, are born with a penis and testicles, and we have to remove them and reconfigure some things down there. That's basically what he says. The audience laughs at this. That's the point of the skit. It's a little bit strange skit or whatever. It's problematic the way it ends in it's weird. But the point is, in 1987, this was a Saturday Night Live skit. Today, it's the world that we live in. And you can say you're a girl without even that operation, as well, as they joked about in Saturday Night Live. The point is that this hasn't always been the case. People used to be able to define men and women. You, my friends, still can. I certainly can. But I've got to take a break. Quick time out here. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Third and final segment of today's episode on this Q&A Friday, my friends. It's good to be here. Hope you have a great weekend as well. What's the WNBA to do here? What's the WNBA to do? Well, they've got a couple of options here as far as what their logical. Now, by logical, I don't mean what makes sense. I just mean the options that are available. It means that they might choose something that doesn't make sense. I'm just listing what these options what these options are, even if they don't make sense, which of course some of them don't. So the first and most obvious thing that they could do and that they should do is to adopt a biological sex rule. Define woman as an adult human female. Restrict the eligibility of players who are not, restrict eligibility to players who are female. This would be a clear, consistent, objective reality that they could easily make decisions and determine eligibility of players by. That's what they should do. It resolves the question immediately. It fits scientifically. That's what they could do. They're not going to do that. I'm almost certain that they're not going to do that if I had to make a prediction here. Another option is they could recognize transgender women, but they could reject Enes, Kanter, Freedom, and Royce White from playing. And they could do this two different ways. Well, first of all, I think the easier way to say this is that they could reject Freedom and White from playing and not address it at all, right? They could just say, you're not eligible to play, and still not define what a woman is, and still not set forth the rules and definitions needed to navigate this stuff. They could do that. They could reject them silently. Boy, that's I think the route that we're going. So they could come out and make a statement and, as one option, and say these two guys are not eligible. They are they're mocking the trans community and so forth. But that's going to present problems, because here's the obvious problem. How can you say Royce White and Enes, Kanter, Freedom are not transgender women if you don't have any definition for what a woman is or for what a transgender woman is, right? If you don't have any definitions, then these guys are whatever they say they are. In fact, that's usually how these arguments go. You should respect a person enough to use their preferred pronouns. Well, these two come along and say, I identify as a woman when it's time to play basketball, or however they say it. So I'm a woman. I want to play. You can't say you're a fake trans woman. Well, they're going to try to say that. But see, the thing is, everybody recognizes this. Everybody recognizes that these are men who are trying to exploit the system to make a point here. And I'm glad that they are, by the way. But if you recognize that, then you also recognize what a woman is, right? These two things go hand in hand, but they don't want to do that. They don't want to do that because they don't want to make a objective definition of what a woman is, because it will undermine their political ideology and their worldview. So they can't do that. They can't do that. And they won't do that. I suspect the way that this is going is that they're going to deny them to play. They're not going to let these guys play. Listen, if you thought Wilt Chamberlain's numbers were impressive in the WNBA back in the 50s, 60s, whatever, you should see what these men's stats would be in the WNBA. Royce White, Enes Kanter would dominate in ways that Wilt Chamberlain could have only dreamed about. These guys could score 60 points a game if they wanted, have 30 rebounds a game, have 20 blocks a game. And these guys would shatter records. And everybody, now there's some who pretend that they don't know that, but this is absolutely unequivocally what would happen. I suspect where this is going is that the WNBA will continue to preserve this ambiguity, because again, if you define something, the trans movement falls apart. If you stand for truth, the trans movement falls apart. And the WNBA is woke today. They are. The NBA, the WNBA, listen, I'm working on a book. I've got the manuscript done. And in this book, we're talking about the cold civil war that we face. And there's multiple battlefronts that we face. One of them is entertainment. And these battlefronts have been taken over by leftists, things like entertainment, which include Hollywood, the NBA, the NFL, the WNBA. And these things are used in conjunction with the media, in conjunction with the bureaucratic state and the government, in conjunction with woke business. All these things are used to subtly, incessantly push a radical leftist viewpoint upon you. When you watch television, when you try to register something with your government, the way that they communicate with you, academia, the way that they teach you, all these things subtly push you towards adopting or accepting a radical leftist worldview. And so the WNBA, the NBA is used for that. And they are not going to define a term that they know that it's going to make them losers automatically. So I suspect they're going to do one of two things. They're going to either make phone calls to all the teams and say, listen, we're not defining a woman, but you can't draft these guys. I suspect they don't even have to do that. All the owners, all the GMs understand what's going on, what the WNBA wants. They know they don't want these guys in the league. They're not going to get drafted. But this is going to open themselves up to a big lawsuit, and I hope these guys pursue it. But I've got to run. Have a great weekend, my friends. SDG.